You have seen this street 1,000 times. Rows of identical brick houses, shoulder to shoulder, stretching all the way to the horizon. Same front doors, same little windows, same low roofs, repeating across the landscape like a copy and paste error. Right now, around 1 in 4 homes in England is one of these. In some parts of the country, it is closer to 1 in 3. And almost nobody who lives in them knows the truth about where they came from. Because these houses were not born in a factory town. They were born as a luxury for the super rich. And the reason there are now millions of them, packed into every British city, comes down to something nobody wants to put on a postcard. A disease that killed so many people, the government had to redesign the street itself. This is the story of the British terraced house, and it is far darker and far stranger than anyone ever told you. Let's start with the thing that should bother you more than it does. Britain is a nation obsessed with individuality. Every Brit will tell you that their home is their castle, and yet this one small island decided to build the exact same house over and over millions of times until entire cities look like they came out of a single mould. Drive through the north of England and it is relentless. In the northwest, terraced houses make up around 1/3 of every home still standing. It is a similar story across Yorkshire. Long brick canyons of them curving over hills, running right down to the sea. There is something almost hypnotic about it, and there is a reason your brain finds those repeating rows strangely calming. We are wired to read symmetry and order as safety, but order on this scale does not happen by accident. Somebody decided that Britain would look like this. The question is who? And the answer starts in the last place you would ever expect. Not in a slum, in a palace. Rewind to the 1700s. Long before the factories, long before the smoke, the terrace was the most fashionable address in the country. Georgian architects had fallen in love with a very particular idea. Instead of building grand houses one at a time, they lined them up in a single sweeping row, hid them behind one enormous, perfectly symmetrical facade, and made a whole street look like one gigantic stately mansion. It was clever social theatre, a dozen separate homes, dressed up to look like the palace of a single lord. In cities like Bath, they curved these rows into vast stone crescents that still stop tourists in their tracks today. In London and Edinburgh, the wealthy paid small fortunes to live in them, and the word they used for this elegant row of homes was terrace. Say that word now, and you picture a cramped worker's cottage. But back then, terrace meant money. It meant taste. It meant you had arrived. This is the first twist in the whole story. The humble little house that came to symbolise the British working class began its life as a flex for the aristocracy. So, how on earth did it fall so far, so fast? For that, you need a bomb to go off. A population bomb. In the space of a single century, Britain changed more than it had in the previous 1,000 years. Between 1801 and 1901, the population multiplied 4-fold. But that number hides the real earthquake, because people did not just multiply, they moved. Steam engines and factories were rising in towns like Manchester, Leeds and Birmingham, and they were hungry for hands to work them, so the countryside began to empty. Families who had farmed the same fields for generations walked away and poured into the cities chasing wages. In some towns, the urban population did not just grow, it exploded nearly tenfold. Think about what that actually means on the ground. Hundreds of thousands of human beings arriving in cities that had nowhere to put them. No houses, no plan, no sanitation, just bodies, and the desperate, immediate need to get a roof over every single one of them, fast and cheap. This was one of the largest housing crises in human history, and the tool somebody reached for was that elegant aristocratic invention, the terrace, except now it was about to be stripped right down to the bone. Here is why the terrace won. Picture building a single detached house, 4 outside walls, 4 walls worth of bricks. Land needed on every side, expensive, slow. Now push a whole row of houses together so they share their side walls. Suddenly, one wall is doing the job of 2. You use less brick, less land, less time, and you fit far more families onto the same strip of ground. There is a hidden bonus too. A house squeezed between 2 neighbours loses far less heat because 2 of its walls are warmed from the other side. For a builder trying to house an army of factory workers at the lowest possible cost, this was close to a perfect machine. Speculative builders threw them up at incredible speed, copying the same floor plans straight out of cheap pattern books, street after street after street. Many cut every corner they could get away with, chasing profit over quality. Mass-produced brick made it cheaper still. And when the railways started hauling slate down from the mountains of Wales, even the roofs became identical. The aristocrats' beautiful terrace had been photocopied, shrunk, and sold to the poor. But some builders found a way to make it cheaper still. And that is where this story turns genuinely grim. They were called back-to-backs, and the idea was brutally simple. If sharing 2 walls saves money, why not share 3? So they built houses that shared their side walls and their back wall, crammed together in blocks, often facing inward around a tiny shared courtyard. It meant a single house could get away with just one external wall, one side with a door and a window, every other side sealed against another family. In cities like Nottingham, this became the default, and at one point roughly 2/3 of the entire city was built this way. Leeds, Birmingham and Bradford filled up with them too. Now imagine living inside one. No back door, no way to open a window on the far side because there was no far side. Air came in the front and had nowhere to go. Light barely reached the back rooms. Whole families, sometimes 7 or 8 people, packed into 2 small rooms stacked one on top of the other, sharing a single outdoor toilet with a dozen other households. It was cheap, it was efficient, and it was quietly turning into a death trap. Because when you pack that many people that tightly, with no clean water, no drains worth the name, and one shared privy serving an entire court, you have not built a neighbourhood. You have built a laboratory for disease. Cholera swept through these streets in waves. Typhoid came with it. The filth had nowhere to drain, so it sat, and it seeped, and it killed. In Manchester, a doctor named James Niven studied the numbers and found something chilling. People living in back-to-back houses were dying at a rate around 40% higher than people living in houses that could actually breathe. 40%. Same city, same year. The only real difference was the shape of the walls around them. Children were hit the hardest. For the families inside, this was not a statistic. It was a normal week, a cough that turned into a funeral. And for a long time, the men who ran these cities knew exactly what was happening and did almost nothing because slums were profitable and the poor could not vote. But the dying got so bad and so undeniable that something finally cracked. And what happened next did not just clean up a few slums, it redesigned the shape of the British street forever. If this hidden history is landing for you, take 1 second and hit subscribe, because I dig up the stories buried underneath everyday things every single week. Alright, back to the moment everything changed. In 1875, the British government passed something called the Public Health Act, and buried inside it was a single rule that quietly reshaped the entire country. From that point on, new homes could no longer be back-to-backs. Every house had to be a through house, meaning it needed a front and a back both open to the air, so a breeze could actually pass through and carry the sickness out. Then came more rules and more detail. How thick the walls had to be, how high the ceilings, how large the windows, how the damp had to be kept out of the brickwork. Local councils wrote these standards into law, street by street. For the first time in history, the ordinary British house was not simply built, it was designed by legislation. Stop and sit with how strange that actually is. The reason your terraced street looks the way it does, the width of it, the little yard out the back, the window sitting over the kitchen sink, was not chosen by an architect with an eye for beauty. It was written into law by men trying to stop a disease from killing off the workforce. A plague, in a very real sense, drew the blueprint, and that blueprint had a name that has survived to this day. They called them Bylaw terraces, named after the local bylaws that shaped them. And this is the house you are picturing right now, even if you have never heard the term before. 2 rooms downstairs, a front parlour kept for best, and a kitchen or scullery at the back. 2 bedrooms upstairs. A small yard behind the house, with the toilet outside, reached along a narrow back alley where the coal was delivered and the waste was carried away. the famous 2 up, 2 down. It was still small. It was still packed in close, but compared to the back-to-back, it was a different world. It had air. It had light front and back. It had a scrap of private outdoor space to call your own. Millions of them went up across every industrial city in the country, and they became the standard British home for the working family for the better part of a century. This should have been the happy ending. The slums outlawed, the healthy terrace winning out. But there was one city that looked at the new law, folded its arms, and flat out refused. That city was Leeds. Back-to-backs were cheap, they were profitable, and Leeds simply kept on building them, decades after most of the country had stopped. While other cities moved on, Leeds threw up brand new back-to-backs right through the 1890s, past the turn of the century, and astonishingly, all the way into the 1930s. It took a second, tougher national law in 1909, banning the design outright and calling it unfit for people to live in, before the tide finally turned for good. It is a small detail, but it tells you something painfully true about human beings. When something is cheap and it makes money, people will keep doing it long after they have been warned it is killing people. Incentives beat good intentions far more often than we like to admit, but even as the very last back-to-backs went up, a much bigger force was already gathering, one that would try to wipe nearly all of these houses off the map entirely. After the 2 world wars, Britain looked at its endless miles of aging terraces and decided they were the problem. The phrase of the day was slum clearance. Whole districts were condemned and the bulldozers moved in. Street after street of terraced houses, some of them barely 50 years old, were flattened. In their place rose the great concrete tower blocks and estates that were meant to be the future of living. This went on for decades, well into the 1970s. Communities that had lived side by side for generations were scattered up into the sky. For a while, it genuinely looked like the terraced house was finished, a relic to be swept away and forgotten. And in a cruel little twist, many of the sturdy Bylaw terraces that did survive were left to rot, half empty and unloved, waiting for a wrecking ball that, for a lot of them, never quite arrived, which turned out to be the luckiest accident in British housing history, because the story was about to flip one final time. The terraces that survived the bulldozers did not stay unloved for long. Slowly, people came back to them. They put bathrooms inside where the old outdoor toilet used to stand. They knocked the poky little rooms together, and they discovered that these solid brick houses, with their high ceilings and their handsome details, were built better than half the things that had replaced them. Then something almost funny happened. The cheapest houses Britain ever built, the ones condemned as slums and bulldozed by the thousand, quietly became some of the most wanted homes in the entire country. Today, there are around 7 million terraced houses in England, roughly a quarter of every home in the nation. In the big cities, buying one can cost you a small fortune. The exact same house that once stood for poverty and disease now stands for character, for community, for a certain very British kind of charm. We crave what feels scarce, and we fall in love with anything that carries a story, and the terrace has both in abundance. The aristocrat's grand idea, dragged down into the slums and condemned to death, had come all the way back around. So the next time you walk down one of those endless brick streets, stop and look at it properly. You are not just looking at houses. You are looking at an aristocrat's vanity, a factory's greed, and a killer disease, all frozen into brick and lined up for miles. A whole hidden history sitting in plain sight, right under everyone's feet. If you want the next everyday thing taken apart exactly like this, there is a video waiting on your screen right now that will completely change how you see something you look at every single day. Go and watch it.